Hello and welcome to another episode of the Northwestern Roundtable Podcast. I am your host, Gavin Dorsey, joined here by fellow Northwestern Roundtable writer Ryan Cole. And we're coming off of what was an absolutely massive weekend for Northwestern athletics. Northwestern field hockey wins its third national championship in 5 years, an absolute dynasty, taking down number 1 North Carolina in the semis and number 2 Princeton in the championship in double overtime. Back-to-back national championships for Tracy Fuchs and that squad. Huge congrats go out to them. On the basketball side, Northwestern ended up splitting in West Virginia, losing narrowly to UVA, but beating South Carolina. The women's basketball team also beat Cleveland State. And what we're going to talk about mostly today, the football team clinched bowl eligibility 38-35, finally got a win at Wrigley Field, this time over the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Ryan, how are you doing today? And what was your overall experience this weekend with so many thrilling victories for the Cats?
Yeah, no, I'm doing well, Gavin. Thanks for having me on as always. Crazy weekend, lots to pay attention to and watch if you're a Northwestern fan for sure. Obviously want to extend my congratulations to Tracy Fuchs and the field hockey team. It's pretty amazing what they do on a year in, year out basis. The football game, you and I were there up in the Wrigley press box, and it started out a little hairy, but they ended up getting the job done, and pretty cool for Braun to go to another bowl here with this team that, it really felt like, and we've talked about this, it really felt like they were good enough to make a bowl game and deserve to make one. And happy for them that they got it done, even if it was a bit of a nail biter.
Certainly. It was a good start for Northwestern, which had just its, I believe, second opening drive touchdown of Big Ten play of the season. First one came against USC, and by all accounts, really were dominating that game. But, you give up the long punt return or long kickoff return to Coy Parrish. All of a sudden, Minnesota's winning with 5 yards of total offense, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So Northwestern ends up getting behind early, rallying in the third quarter and fourth quarter, coming out on top thanks to some big-time throws from Preston Stone, who was absolutely phenomenal. I think overall the story has to be Northwestern's offense. Before this game, Zach Lujan's offense, as in the 2 years that he has been offensive coordinator, had put up 22 points as the most that Northwestern had ever scored in a Big Ten game. That was against Penn State and against Michigan. Northwestern's offense accounted for 38 against Minnesota on Saturday at Wrigley Field. Ryan, what'd you see out of what that group did so well and how it finally seemed like everything really just clicked for Northwestern?
Well, really the whole game, it felt like, we finally got to see a multi-dimensional offense from the Cats. They've had this sort of dynamic and effective run game this whole year. We've talked a lot about the offensive line and, the job Caleb Komolafe's done, since Cam Porter went down, and that's been a positive all year. But, the passing game with Preston Stone and some inexperienced wide receivers, it's been a little bit up and down. And, we haven't really necessarily seen both the running game and the passing game work at the same time. And, we finally did this weekend against Minnesota. And, they outgained them 224 to 144 in the first half, and they were still losing. Penalties were an issue in the first half, I would say. There were 8. That's too many. We can sit here and talk about, analyze each one, and some of them were maybe a little ticky-tack. And, I know we've talked about that already, but you can't have 8 penalties. You can't give up that return. But, overall, I think it was nice to see that they can put both components of the offense together. I had a friend come up to me after the game who goes to Northwestern, and he was like, it was weird to see that they threw the ball so well and they kind of struggled on the ground. And I was like, no, they didn't struggle on the ground at all. It just might have seemed that way because this wasn't the kind of game you were used to, But Komolafe still at 129 yards. They had 220 rushing yards throughout the contest. So they were just firing on all cylinders, and it was impressive to watch. And it's the reason why they were able to mount that comeback despite the penalties and the poor special teams play. They also had the muff, which was at the beginning of the second half, which could have, in a different game, would have put them out of it. But since they had that offense going, they went down and scored 3 touchdowns in the second half, and there we go.
Yeah, to me, I think that everything about the offense's success starts and ends with Preston Stone. And to me, this was the actualized game of what we expected to see out of Zach Lujan's offense. A perfect balance of trick plays and, just regular in rhythm stuff. Zero pressure, zero hurries allowed by Northwestern's offensive line. A two-headed monster in the backfield between Hyman and Komolafe, and Komolafe ends up breaking for a 46-yard touchdown and then another 43-yard run that almost was a touchdown, almost was a fumble. But overall, when you have a guy like Preston Stone who goes 15 for 15 passing in the second half, doesn't miss a single completion in that time, it allows you to do so much more. It pushes the safeties back. The run game is able to flourish. They can work over the field. They have to worry about sending too much pressure because all of a sudden he's just dicing you up on the back end. Overall, this seemed like what we've been waiting for from this entire season. And, it kind of stinks that it took until the penultimate game of the season for it to get to this point. But I think overall, when you look at the health of the program and, long-term sustainability, this is definitely the type of game that gives you confidence moving forward because there weren't just contributions from the team's top-level playmakers as usual. You had Hayden Elegon leaves on the first play of the game with an injury, comes back in, ends up with 127 yards and 7 catches. Both of those, I believe, are career highs. Just overall an incredibly successful day for Northwestern. And I really wish we got to see more of it throughout the year. There's only 2 games remaining, but you never know. Maybe if this game is any indicator, there will be a lot more, success coming up through the ranks. And it seems like Northwestern has really developed a lot of its reserve players well. So definitely gave me a lot of confidence from this game specifically and also moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think another thing about Stone that I just want to point out was that he didn't throw any interceptions and he played a clean game. That's we've seen some games from him where, maybe he starts out looking okay, looking strong, and then he throws a pick and it kind of gets wonky from there. And that's been, a key for him that I've harped on in a lot of my columns throughout the year is just if he doesn't turn the ball over, he's a much more effective quarterback and Northwestern has a much better chance to win. And then I think the other person I want to highlight is Hayden Elegon. Just again, he was fantastic. And I mean, it's early. He's still a sophomore, but it's hard not to watch Hayden Elegon play football and think, man, that guy could be a professional. I mean, he is so long. He's fast. He can make contested catches. He can beat you one-on-one. He can do everything. And as impressive as Griffin Wilde has been all year, he was good in this game again. He had 11 for 111, which is pretty amazing. Elegon is fantastic, and if he can just develop into a more consistent player, he's going to be a big deal for this Northwestern team in future years. I really believe that.
Yeah, certainly. I think also Northwestern's just ability to move the chains was such a critical, factor in this. The success in the air and on the ground. I mean, you just felt every time they got to third down that it was going to be a completion. Even at the end of the game when, there's a 15-yard penalty that backs them up and it's a big scramble from Preston Stone and a big completion to Hunter Welsing, still able to get into field goal range for Jack Olson, ended up really being a critical drive. Northwestern had the muff punt to start the second half, but there were no turnovers from the offense. I mean, that was a special teams mistake from Chase Farrell, who just misjudged it. After that, Northwestern's second half possessions went touchdown, 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 game-winning field goal. And so, you can harp on the defense a little bit for giving up 35 points in that game where we really haven't seen, Northwestern's defense break like that, especially to, a freshman quarterback, albeit somebody who's very talented. But, overall, very, very encouraging offensive day for Northwestern. And I'm excited to see what happens against Illinois. I mean, I think this is an Illinois team that was ranked last week, lost 27-10 against a bad Wisconsin team. they couldn't really run the ball at all, which is what Northwestern kind of struggled with against Michigan and against USC. Did a much better job against Minnesota, but they hadn't been running the ball super well overall. I don't know. I'm curious to see what happens this weekend on the road in a night environment, because on one hand, it does feel like Northwestern has, got the monkey off their back by clinching bowl eligibility a week early. But at the same point in time, it feels like this game is really heavily emphasized as, a rivalry game. The goal wasn't just to get to a bowl game. The rivalry game means a big deal, and I'm curious to see how that looks this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think the rivalry game is obviously the rivalry aspect obviously makes it more important. You got the hat trophy, and I think the context of how they went down last year, kind of getting blown out at Wrigley, and it was a pretty depressing end of the year. And I remember, listening to Braun talk after that, and he was not in a good mood. So I guarantee you that they're amped up for this game. And last week I said that if they beat Minnesota, I thought that they would go on and beat Illinois. And the first half gave me pause, and it still does. There were a lot of mistakes in that half, and you shouldn't be down by the score that they were down. They were down a touchdown going into the break. You shouldn't be down that much when you're outgaining a team by as much as Northwestern was outgaining them. But there's no excuse for that. But if they come out of the gates firing like they did in the second half, then yeah, I think they're going to beat Illinois. I think they absolutely have a good shot, and the fact that the Illini had such a bad looking loss last week, I think that helps as well.
Has this past weekend's game against Minnesota, has that changed the way that you kind of look at the trajectory of this season for Northwestern and for the program moving forward?
Well, sure. I mean, absolutely. I think this season they're two separate questions, right? Because this season is still going to be all about Preston Stone. And, I want to be careful not to overanalyze this week's game and expect Stone to look like that, against Illinois and then again in the bowl game. But if he does, then I think it absolutely changes the outlook for this year's team. I mean, I think if Stone looks like that and the passing game is there, then I think they can beat Illinois and they can beat whoever they play in the bowl game. If it's not there, then, they're going to have to win the way that they won all year, which is play really good defense, run around, tackle hard, and then win the game by controlling possession and having a potent rushing attack behind Komolafe and Hyman. So they can still win those two games doing it that way, but there's less room for error than if you have, Stone going out there throwing for 305 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I think seeing that he can do that and that he has that in him has definitely changed my outlook for this year. As far as future years, I think I hate to continue going back to him, but I think the Elegon thing is a really big deal. Wilde, he's a junior. He's got another year. Elegon has more years. If they're going to be a legit, WR1, WR2 combo, and you still got a dominant offensive line and a good running game, then really the missing piece is, how are you replacing Preston Stone this offseason, I think. And if you do that well, then I think you're really set up for a solid 2026 on offense. Because it has felt all year like that receiver depth has been kind of the main thing missing. And, we've really harped on it. And if Elegon is stepping up and he's going to kind of, it's one game, but, if he's going to kind of take that role, then I think, they really have something brewing on offense, into the future. And, also credit to Lujan for this game, as you pointed out. Probably his best game as an OC, so that's always good to see if you're evaluating things from kind of a program-wide perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I actually just ended up publishing a story today, talking about it just feels like the culture is there now. Like it seems like the blueprint is a little bit, is set in stone for this team to follow. It's you can argue that first season, 2023 was just kind of like catching lightning in a bottle. They end up going on that big run. Everything clicks. And then last season just kind of comes crumbling down. But I don't know if you can realistically say that this year's roster is that much better than last year's roster that went 4-8. I mean, there are plenty of talented, players on there that come in, notably Griffin Wilde, but they had, AJ Henning is an NFL caliber receiver on the practice squad currently. Bryce Kurtz before his injury was really good as well. Really just the big missing piece was quarterback who can throw beyond the sticks and, health of the offensive line, depth of the offensive line. If this team beats Illinois, is this team 3 games more talented than last year's team? I don't know that. But what I do know is that it really seems to be a lot more bought in. It seems like they are now trusting what the coaching staff is preaching, the work that they've put in, and seeing that it's actually leading to results. Last year there were fair share of blowout losses, just, the only 2 Big Ten wins coming over teams that, frankly, Northwestern should have beaten in Big Ten play, in Purdue and Maryland. And this year, we've now seen 2 massive wins over teams that were supposedly better than Northwestern in Penn State and Minnesota, and down to the wire, lost on a field goal against Michigan, who is still in contention for the college football playoff, could very well get there if they end up upsetting Ohio State this Saturday. Overall, when I not just what I'm watching on the field, but when I'm listening to what these guys are saying and how they're talking about their trust in each other, their trust in the coaching staff, and their belief, they're not just content to, go out and try to win 6 or 7 or like 5, 6, 7 games every year. They are legitimately believing that this is a Big Ten championship caliber program, or it will be. And whether we see that come to fruition or not, is left to be said. But I think all of the seeds have been planted, if that makes sense. Quarterbacks can come and go, players can come and go, but we've seen a lot of developmental success within this program. A lot of these players who were really good this year were on the team last year, and they've just improved and they're unified. There's cohesion within the unit. I just think overall, am I jumping to conclusions a little bit after one game? Probably, but it is overall the full season in the scope of that, and how they rebounded from the loss to Oregon and went on that win streak, how they've handled this little 3-game losing streak and been able to survive through that. Overall, am I being a little bit too hopeful? Maybe, but I can see the vision for how this Northwestern team and how this Northwestern program, gets back to that 7, 8, 9 win annually program type of level. All it takes is just one break in the scheduling year, sort of like how Illinois or how Indiana had last year, and this team could absolutely make a run toward a Big Ten title. Is that too much to say? Am I putting the cart before the horse here?
No. And I think I would have absolutely said you were, even, 3 or 4 weeks ago, really before the Penn State win was where I started to think, okay, maybe Braun isn't like completely off base here when he's saying he wants to compete for Big Ten championships. And then as the season went on, I think there's just been more and more evidence, as you point out. I think it was interesting you brought up the 2023 team, and I think the doubters will look at this and they'll say, well, Braun made a bowl in 2023 and then immediately had the 2024 year where they went 4-8 and they weren't very good. Who's to say that they're not going to regress immediately next year like they did then? And this is something Braun talked about, comparing this Minnesota game to the Illinois game from 2 years ago in 2023 when they won in a crazy, I forget the exact final score, but I think it was like 45-42 or something. And I think both games kind of are a microcosm of the two teams, right? Like that game in 2023, it was a lot more fluky than this win over Minnesota. I think they won on a pass interference that couldn't in the end zone that couldn't be called because the ball was tipped, and otherwise they definitely would have lost that game. And Braun was saying everything about this win just felt gritty and real. They got behind and then, nose to the ground, and it was like, okay, we got to go score on every drive. And that's what they did. Stone was perfect. They ran the ball well. They had 2 receivers who were incredibly impactful, and they went and took the game from Minnesota. And that's an attitude that, in my almost, I guess, 4 years now of covering this team, I've never seen a Northwestern team play with that identity. I'm sure they did in the past when they were, having some of those seasons when they were ranked, but that's not something that I've seen. And I think it's a real testament to what Braun's building here. And I would almost compare it to what we've seen from Chris Collins and the basketball team over the last, since the Boo Booey era started. It's just, you can kind of feel it when there's just a different, and that sounds corny and fake, but you can kind of feel it when there's a different vibe from the players, and you can tell that they really want to play for their coach and they really want to play for each other and for the program. And when you sit in men's basketball pressers for the past few years, you hear Boo Booey and you hear Brooks Barnheiser and you hear Nick Martinelli, and all they want to talk about is how much they love Northwestern and how much they want to win for Northwestern and how much they want to win for their coaches and their teammates. And I think you're starting to hear that from guys like Preston Stone and guys like Caleb Komalafe, just how bonded that locker room is. And it's a testament to the culture that Braun has built. This year's team is 6-5. I think we all agree it could be better than that. They had a tough schedule, tough run there with the 3-game losing streak. But I'm looking forward with a positive attitude as well, because I think this is going to translate. I don't expect them to regress the way they did between 23 and 24. I think we're going to see something entirely different.
Yeah, I think the thing that's encouraging for me as well is that it just seems more receptive to change. Like looking at something, saying this is a problem, and then changing it, or even,
Yeah.
just a lack of contentment. Um, even after wins, you could hear them the entire year. Matt Shelton made that bingo board. Where is it on our list of goals to win this game? It isn't. We're still focused on whatever. And now they finally hit the bowl game mark, and now we're at the part where they're looking to win the rivalry game. But overall, just the fact that this program and Braun doesn't seem content with the results and is very process oriented, trying to make sure that everything is perfect, gives me a lot of hope and a lot of optimism that this program is trending in the right direction. And you look at how they adapted the admissions process and the transfer portal and NIL usage, and all of those things are expanding. It just seems like things are going in the right direction. Looking forward a little bit to this weekend against Illinois. I'm planning on being there. I know you're at home for Thanksgiving with your family, but overall, definitely seems like a winnable game. Illinois was outgained by a terrible Wisconsin team, only had 50 yards on the ground, and Luke Altmaier, the quarterback, was their leading rusher. What are you looking at from the Wildcats in order to head into Champaign and come out with a win this weekend?
Well, first of all, and I talked about this, I believe it was before the Nebraska game, because they had been coming off a bad loss. I forget exactly who it was to. But one of the things that concerned me then and concerns me now about Illinois is sort of I believe I've heard it called the like wounded animal syndrome, where they, come back. They play they play their next game and look much better after a crushing loss. And so, I think Illinois is going to be, we talk about how motivated Northwestern might look in the battle for the hat in this rivalry game. They got to be ready for Illinois to have that same level of motivation and, if not a higher one, coming off a loss that was as frustrating as that one. But I also think, if Northwestern can, I think they obviously the passing game was really impressive in this last game, but I think they can, they need to not get too far away from their roots. I think they should continue to lean into their identity as a run first football team and supplement with the pass, and hopefully, hopefully Stone looks that good again. But Illinois really struggled to run the ball against Wisconsin. Altmaier, their quarterback, was their leading rusher. So I think, if you play good defense and you run the football well, you're going to maintain possession for a long time. And they're going to have a hard time playing that game and kind of matching you there. So I think if Northwestern plays kind of the stereotypical way that they won football games this year, I think they're going to have a really good shot.
You have a score prediction? You got any predictions? I know you said
Yeah,
that if they
yeah.
beat Minnesota, that you would predict them to beat Illinois as well.
Yes, I will. I would like to, before I say my score prediction, my one caveat to it is that if they take the penalties and they play poor special teams like they did in the first half, I don't think that this is going to be as forgiving of a game. I think if they played the same first half they played against Minnesota, they probably lose this game. But I'm going to say they don't do that. I think they rebound. I think they look more like the team we saw in the second half. Um, and I think they come out with a win. I think it looks something like it'll be close. I think I'll go 27-24 Northwestern wins.
Okay, gotcha. I similarly am going to go with Northwestern. I've gone this entire season, sticking to my preseason predictions of, this is a 5-7 team. They're going to beat Western Illinois. They're going to beat Purdue. They're going to beat UCLA. Maybe it wasn't UCLA. I did pick UCLA in the moment, but the one that I got wrong was Penn State, and I did think they were going to beat Minnesota. And I'm like, you know what, 5-7, that seems about right. They end up obviously upsetting Penn State, and I'm like, okay, well, 6-6, I still think they're going to win these games. I thought that they would beat Minnesota. Like, I think my prediction was 23-21 or 21-17, something like that. Like a decently low
Sounds
scoring
about right.
game.
We were really close.
A
Yeah.
38 a 38 point explosion on offense. I don't know. I'm feeling it. I'm riding the wave. I'm going to take the Wildcats in this one. Wisconsin cannot throw the ball. They just ran it right down Illinois' throat, almost 5 yards a carry on offense. I expect this to be a time of possession battle where Northwestern just soaks up the clock. And if you can get just this, probably not the same 15 for 15 high quality Preston Stone, but something very similar and fewer mistakes, I'm going to go with 30-21 Northwestern. Illinois was also 4 for 13 on third down. I think Northwestern's, generally when they've won the third down battle on defense, they've been able to come out with wins. The issue is when they get them to third and long and give up a massive third down play. I think if Northwestern can win that and run the ball well, that's going to be, their main goal, their main way that they can defeat Illinois. And then you're looking at an entirely different season. 7-5, you almost take down Michigan, you almost take down Nebraska, USC, there's a couple mistakes here and there. Maybe it goes differently.
Yeah.
Tulane, you're starting looking at maybe that was just an outlier game and everyone was nervous and it was hot. I mean, not to make excuses or anything, but you would think about the season entirely different at 7-5. I mean, granted, that 2023 season, they end up going on a run. They end up 8-5. You asked me after that Rutgers game to open the year where Ben Bryant looks awful, is this team going to go 8-5? I'd say absolutely not. This team might win 2 or 3 games. Anything is possible. Ryan, anything else you wanted to add? I'm really appreciative you came on today, but any final closing thoughts about what we've seen from Northwestern, what you're looking for, or just overall thoughts about the program?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my one closing thought is I'm not sure that you've ever taken Northwestern by a higher margin of victory than me. So I think this might be a first. I feel like I've generally been a little more positive in the score predictions, but
I
I
might
don't
have
know.
got you in Western Illinois. I think I picked a pretty big
Oh,
margin for
that's
that. That might have been the only one, but everything else has been like
yeah,
a one score game. Northwestern wins or Northwestern loses. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I
yeah.
picked a lot of close
You got
games.
me you got me fired up for this weekend. So now I'm, higher expectations.
We'll
Gavin
see.
Dorsey.
We'll see. A
Um,
night game finally after all of these 11 a.m. kickoffs. They couldn't have done it when we were right here. We couldn't have had to wake up super early and go right to Wrigley or right to Northwestern, but is what it is. Ryan,
yeah, and then
anything else
just
you wanted to
happy
add? I wasn't
Thanksgiving.
sure if I was cutting you off there.
No, you're good. I think it was just a little slow, but just wanted to say happy Thanksgiving to everybody and hope everyone has a nice day with their families.
You as well, all of the Northwestern Roundtable readers, listeners, watchers as well. I am thankful for the Northwestern field hockey team, 3-time national champions. Incredibly fun to watch and be a part of. As always, you can find more Northwestern Roundtable coverage at northwesternroundtable.com. We have daily written and video and audio coverage, or I guess daily written and weekly podcasts that we have on there. Really exciting stuff. You can join the community, make your own post, share your thoughts about the Wildcats, get off some hot takes, see if you have a bigger scoring margin prediction against Illinois than Ryan and I have. Maybe, maybe not. But as always, you can find us on YouTube and Spotify for more episodes of the Northwestern Roundtable Podcast for football, men's basketball, and women's basketball. Also, video coverage from press conferences, games, instant reactions. And as always, remember to join the community. Thanks so much for joining us today. And as always, I guess not as always, but annually, happy Thanksgiving.